At my niece's birthday party, everything looked picture perfect at first. Balloons floated against the ceiling, paper streamers hung from the doorways, and kids' laughter bounced through the house like bubbles ready to burst. My daughter twirled beside me, proud of her new hairstyle. Soft curls pinned with tiny pearl clips framed her 11-year-old face. She kept smoothing the hem of her pale blue dress, nervous but excited. She had been planning her look for weeks, reminding me almost daily to book the salon appointment. It mattered to her. She wanted to feel pretty, not for the crowd, but because it was her cousin's big day, and she wanted to bring her best self. I remember the smell of frosted cake and plastic cups of fruit punch as we entered. Relatives greeted one another with forced warmth, hugs that lingered too long, and compliments dipped in sugar and judgment. My mother-in-law stood at the center of it all, the self-appointed queen of family gatherings. She wore her pearls as if they were a crown, and her smile as if it were a weapon. Her eyes flicked over my daughter like a scanner, pausing too long, narrowing with something sharp and ugly. I should have noticed then, but I brushed it off, telling myself she was just stressed from hosting. Grace, my daughter, handed the birthday gift to her cousin Bella. She had wrapped it herself, pink paper covered in glitter stickers, and inside was a handmade bracelet. She was proud of it. Bella barely looked, tossing it onto the pile of other presents. My mother-in-law's voice sliced the air. Hair like that? On a little girl? Who are you trying to impress? She said it loudly enough that 3 other moms looked over. I caught the shift in Grace's shoulders, the way her chin dropped a fraction, but she smiled anyway. I bent down and whispered, "Ignore it. Just enjoy the party." That was my mistake, trying to keep peace when war was already brewing. The kids ran off to play games while the adults lingered around the buffet table. I caught glimpses of Grace weaving in and out of the group, laughter bubbling, her curls catching the light. My chest swelled with a fragile pride. But then came that strange silence that only mothers know. The sudden absence of your child's voice in a place where there should be noise. My heart stuttered. I looked around and didn't see her. Moments later, I heard the scrape of a chair from the back patio. When I stepped outside, my world tilted. There she was, my daughter, sitting rigidly in a chair, my mother-in-law looming over her, scissors glinting in her hand. Snip, snip. Locks of Grace's hair floated to the ground like fallen feathers. For a heartbeat, I couldn't move. My body betrayed me, frozen by disbelief. Then Grace's eyes met mine, wide, wet, begging. That was the soundless scream that snapped me awake. "What are you doing?" My voice cracked like a whip, cutting through the chatter inside. My mother-in-law didn't flinch. She didn't even pause. Another lock fell. She muttered, "She was showing off. I fixed it." The air around me trembled. The smell of frosting and party balloons turned sour in my nose. I wanted to snatch the scissors, to shove her away, to yell until the windows shattered. Instead, I crossed the patio, knelt beside my daughter, and placed my hands firmly on her trembling shoulders. "It's just hair," my mother-in-law added, her lips curling in a smirk. "Don't make a scene." I looked at her, and in that second, I didn't see a grandmother. I saw a bully wrapped in pearls. My voice dropped, quiet, colder than I meant it to be. "This isn't over." Grace's breath hitched. I guided her away, each step deliberate, each movement fueled by the fire in my veins. Behind me, relatives shifted uncomfortably, some pretending not to notice, others whispering. Not one person intervened. Not one hand stopped the humiliation. Inside, the contrast was unbearable. Children laughed over spilled juice, Bella tore through wrapping paper, and my sister-in-law clapped like this was any other birthday. Meanwhile, my daughter's head looked butchered, curls replaced by jagged edges. The sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror nearly broke me. She reached up to touch the uneven strands, fingers trembling. "Mom," she whispered, trying to smile. "Does it look that bad?" Her voice was small, but her eyes asked a bigger question. Do I still matter? Am I still enough? I pulled her close. "You are beautiful, always." My throat burned. My mother-in-law strolled in casually, wiping her hands like she had just finished trimming a hedge. "She'll thank me later. Discipline builds character." I nearly laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You call this discipline?" Her gaze locked with mine, steady. daring me to argue in front of everyone. I didn't give her the satisfaction. I only said, calm and sharp, "We're leaving." Grace clutched my hand tightly. As we stepped toward the door, I caught sight of the birthday cake, candles waiting to be lit. It struck me how life could look so sweet and smell so sugary while cruelty festered right beside it. The drive home was quiet. Grace sat in the passenger seat, pulling the pearl pins from the scraps of her hair, one by one, as if each pin carried the weight of betrayal. I gripped the steering wheel, knuckles white, replaying the scene until my jaw ached from clenching. "Mom," she finally whispered, "can it be fixed?" I glanced at her, heart splintering. "We'll make it beautiful again. I promise." She nodded, trusting me, even now. That trust was heavier than iron. It was a vow I had no intention of breaking. That night, I gathered the fallen hair from her dress and folded it into a tissue. I tucked it into my purse, not because I wanted to keep it, but because I knew one day it would serve as evidence. Evidence that love, when attacked, becomes fire. Evidence that what happened at that party was more than a haircut. It was an assault on dignity, on identity, on the bond between mother and daughter. I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the glint of scissors, the smirk on her face, the trembling of my daughter's shoulders. I sat in the dark living room, the clock ticking like a drumbeat, and whispered to myself, tomorrow, tomorrow, she would see what it meant to cut into the wrong child's life. That morning had started so beautifully that the memory now feels cruel. Grace woke up earlier than usual, her excitement bubbling over before the sun even climbed high. She came into my room wearing her bathrobe, carrying the invitation card she had pinned to her corkboard weeks earlier. She tapped it like it was proof of belonging. "Today's the day," she whispered, smiling with the kind of hope only children can hold without fear of disappointment. I smiled back and told her to get ready. She had begged me for days to let her go to a real salon, not the discount strip mall one with harsh fluorescent lights and stylists who treated hair like a chore. So I had worked 2 extra shifts, traded sleep for money, just to give her this small dream. I remember the stylist's gentle hands curling her hair, the delicate pearl pins Grace picked out herself, the way she turned her head side to side to admire the soft waves. She was radiant, too radiant for a child's party, and maybe that was the first silent crime in my mother-in-law's eyes. We picked out her dress the night before. She chose light blue, with tiny embroidered flowers near the neckline. I ironed it carefully, making sure every crease was gone, as if neat fabric could protect her from messy people. Grace even packed a little gift for Bella, her cousin. She had spent 2 weekends making a bracelet, weaving beads into a careful pattern. She wrapped it with glitter tape, proud of her work. I remember thinking how thoughtful she was compared to the children who only grabbed toys from store shelves. On the way to the party, the car smelled faintly of her perfume. She had borrowed a dab of mine, nervous but thrilled, wanting to feel grown up. She asked me 3 times if Bella would like the bracelet. I answered each time with the same warmth. She will love it. My words were more hope than certainty, but I wanted her to carry joy, not dread. When we pulled into the driveway, I noticed my mother-in-law standing by the doorway, her arms crossed tightly, her lips already pursed, as if she had prepared to disapprove. She wore her pearls, the same set she wore at every family occasion, as if jewelry could prove authority. She scanned us up and down before saying anything, her eyes lingering on Grace's hair. A smile flickered, but it wasn't admiration. It was calculation. I should have paid more attention. I should have trusted my gut when it twisted at that look. But I brushed it off. I told myself she was just being herself, always critical, always jealous. I convinced myself the party would be fine, that she wouldn't dare ruin her granddaughter's celebration. That was my foolish mistake, believing civility would stop cruelty. Inside, the house buzzed with forced cheer. Streamers hung unevenly, the cake sat on the table waiting to be cut, and kids darted between clusters of chatting adults. Grace slipped her gift onto the pile, her eyes shining with pride. Bella hardly glanced at it before tearing into another box, but Grace kept smiling. I swallowed the sting in my throat and reminded myself that kids could be careless. Then came the first jab. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the noise, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Hair like that, on a little girl, Who are you trying to impress? The words landed sharp as broken glass. I saw Grace's smile falter for a second. She forced it back, but I caught her eyes flicker toward me, searching for assurance. I bent down and whispered that she looked beautiful, that she should ignore the comment. I believed that would be enough. It was not the first time my mother-in-law had targeted her. There were countless small moments that piled up, each one a seed of resentment. Like the time at Thanksgiving when Grace wore a dress she had picked herself, and my mother-in-law pursed her lips and said, "That's too flashy for a girl your age." Or the barbecue where she leaned close and muttered, "You don't want to draw too much attention. It makes people jealous." Grace was 10 then, too young to understand the venom hidden in those words, but old enough to shrink under their weight. I had tried to shrug it off. I told myself these were just words, just little comments from an insecure woman. But each remark chipped away at Grace's confidence, teaching her to second-guess her choices, to question her worth. I saw the pattern because I had lived it myself. My mother-in-law had a gift for cloaking cruelty in the language of guidance, making insults sound like advice. She had done it to me for years. Now she was passing the poison to the next generation. That morning, though, I let hope blind me. I told myself Grace was strong, that she would rise above it. I believed a party could be safe, that family meant protection, not harm. I was wrong. I still see the details of those early moments like a cruel film reel. The smell of frosting mixed with the sharp tang of nail polish remover from the women gathered around the table. The sound of children squealing as they played tag in the hallway. The sight of my daughter adjusting her pearl pins one last time, checking her reflection in the hallway mirror, proud of who she was. And then the shift. That sudden absence of her voice, that heavy silence mothers feel before their hearts even understand. I looked around, scanning the room. The kids were laughing, the adults sipping punch, but my daughter was gone. My pulse quickened. I excused myself, stepping toward the back patio. What I found there shattered the illusion I had tried so hard to maintain. But that discovery belongs to another moment. What matters in this one is the cruel irony. I had prepared everything with love. I had spent money I didn't have. I had given Grace the chance to shine. And my mother-in-law had been preparing too. Not with scissors in her hand yet, but with envy in her eyes and poison in her smile. Looking back, the signs were there all along. The long stares, the backhanded compliments, the pursed lips. I ignored them because I wanted peace. I believed in family, even when family had never believed in me. That day, as I smoothed the hem of Grace's dress before walking into the party, I thought I was sending her into a celebration. I didn't know I was sending her straight into the hands of someone who had been waiting for the chance to cut her down. When I stepped onto the patio and saw Grace in that chair, my breath caught in my chest. For a moment, the world shrank to the sound of scissors snipping and the sight of dark curls falling like feathers onto the stone floor. The laughter from inside the house sounded distant, muffled by the roar in my ears. Grace's face was pale, her eyes wide, her lips trembling as she fought back tears. "Stop!" I shouted, my voice shaking the air. But the scissors kept moving. My mother-in-law's hands were steady, deliberate, like she was pruning a plant that dared to grow too wild. She didn't look at me. She didn't even pause. Another strand fell. Grace's gaze found mine. Her eyes begged me to rescue her, though her voice was too weak to call out. That look alone carved itself into my memory like a scar. I rushed forward and gripped her shoulders, shielding her from another cut. "What are you doing?" My words cracked out sharper than I intended. Finally, my mother-in-law raised her eyes. She didn't look ashamed. She looked defiant. "She was showing off," she said coolly. "So I fixed it." End quote. I froze, not because I agreed, but because of the brazenness in her tone. No apology, no hesitation, just cold certainty. Grace whimpered under my hands. I ran my fingers through what was left of her hair, uneven tufts sticking out at jagged angles, pieces hanging too long on one side and too short on the other. It was a massacre, not a haircut. "She's a child," I hissed. "How could you do this?" My mother-in-law crossed her arms, the scissors still dangling between her fingers. "It's just hair. It will grow back. Don't make a scene." My throat burned with words I wanted to unleash, but I swallowed them, knowing if I screamed it would only feed her satisfaction. Grace's shoulders shook beneath my hands. I pulled her against me, tucking her head into my chest. She smelled faintly of hairspray and tears. Inside the house, no one rushed to stop us. A few relatives glanced through the doorway, curious but silent. I saw my sister-in-law Sabrina clearing paper plates, pretending she hadn't heard anything. Bella giggled at something in the background. The smell of frosting drifted out, clashing with the stench of betrayal. I turned back to my mother-in-law. "You think this is discipline? You think humiliating her makes you powerful?" Her mouth curved into something between a smirk and a sneer. "She needed to learn her place. You let her flaunt herself like that, and it makes Bella feel small. A good mother keeps balance." Balance! The word nearly made me laugh. There was nothing balanced about what she had done. This wasn't discipline. It was cruelty dressed in pearls. Grace's voice broke through, small and cracked. "Mom, can we go home?" The sound of it nearly shattered me. I smoothed her back and whispered, "Soon, baby." Then louder, for my mother-in-law to hear, "We're done here." I rose to my feet, holding Grace's hand tightly. My mother-in-law stepped forward, blocking the doorway for just a second. Her voice dropped, low and venomous. "You won't ruin this party. Sit down and act normal." I stared at her, my eyes locked on hers. For the first time, she looked away first. I pushed past her, leading Grace inside. The sight of her reflection in the hallway mirror stopped me cold. The jagged strands made her look like a doll mauled by careless hands. She lifted her fingers to touch her hair, then let them drop as if it burned. My chest tightened. What happened to her hair? My voice cut through the living room, where chatter had only just resumed. Sabrina shrugged without looking up. She wouldn't put it in a ponytail, so we cut it. "You cut it?" My words echoed like shards of glass scattering across the floor. "She was being difficult," my mother-in-law chimed in again, strolling behind me. "We gave her a choice. She refused. Actions have consequences." Grace clung to my arm, her head bowed. Her tears stained the silk of her dress. I felt my pulse pound in my temples. "You told an 11-year-old to obey your command. When she refused, you punished her by destroying something precious to her. That's not a consequence. That's abuse." My mother-in-law scoffed. "It's hair. Don't exaggerate." "No," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "It's dignity. And you stole it." The room went silent. The children froze mid-play. My father-in-law shifted uncomfortably in his chair but said nothing. Sabrina avoided my eyes. Bella clutched her new toys, oblivious to the storm around her. I guided Grace toward the door. Every step felt like tearing away from chains I had allowed too long. My mother-in-law's voice followed us. "If you walk out, don't expect us to forgive you." "Forgive me." The absurdity of it nearly made me laugh. I didn't answer. Grace and I stepped into the cool evening air. On the drive home, she sat silently, pulling the pearl pins from what was left of her hair. Each pin clinked softly against the car's console as she dropped them one by one, like pieces of her pride being discarded. I reached for her hand at a stoplight. Her fingers were cold, trembling slightly. "Does it look really bad?" she whispered finally. My throat ached. "It looks like someone tried to take your shine. But they can't. You are still beautiful." Ugh. Her lips pressed together, as if she wanted to believe me, but couldn't. Tears slid silently down her cheeks. I let her cry. When we got home, she went straight to her room, curling under her blanket with her hoodie pulled tight. I picked up the scissors from my bag. I had snatched them from my mother-in-law's hand as we left, though I barely remembered doing it. Now I stared at them, silver blades smeared with strands of Grace's hair, evidence of what had been done. That night, I sat in the darkened living room, listening to the tick of the clock. The house was quiet, except for Grace's muffled sobs drifting down the hallway. My anger solidified into something sharper. This was no longer just family drama. This was assault. And tomorrow, my mother-in-law would see what it meant to cross a line that could never be uncrossed. That night, as I sat in the dark living room with the scissors lying heavy in my lap, I began to see it all clearly. This wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't about hair or parties or even discipline. It was the culmination of years of small cuts, each one carefully hidden under the disguise of tradition and family pride. I thought back to my first years of marriage, when I was still desperate to be accepted. My mother-in-law had a way of smiling sweetly while planting thorns in my heart. At our wedding rehearsal dinner, she leaned across the table and whispered, "You'll never be able to care for him the way I do." She said it with a smile so gentle that everyone thought she was complimenting me. But I felt the sting. That was her specialty, cruelty wrapped in silk. When Grace was born, I believed maybe things would change. Surely a grandmother would soften when holding her first granddaughter. At first, she seemed to. She cooed and cradled Grace, telling everyone how much the baby resembled her side of the family. But the softness was fleeting. By the time Grace turned 3, my mother-in-law had started her little comparisons. "Bella is already reciting her letters," she would say at family dinners, her voice carrying just enough volume to reach me across the table. Or, "Grace is sweet, but she's a bit slow, don't you think?" I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just family banter, but deep down, I knew it was something darker. She was setting the stage for rivalry, teaching the children that love and approval were limited commodities to be competed for. When Grace was 6, she wore a dress I had saved up for, a simple yellow sundress with embroidered daisies. She twirled in the living room before we left for Easter service. My mother-in-law pursed her lips when she saw her. "Too bright. It looks like you're trying to make her the center of attention," she said it in front of everyone. Grace's face fell, and I felt the sting of my own childhood echoing through her expression. As years passed, the pattern only deepened. Bella's achievements were celebrated with fanfare, photographs, and endless praise. Grace's were dismissed as luck or ignored altogether. When Grace won her school's art contest, proudly holding a certificate and a painting she had worked on for weeks, my mother-in-law barely looked up. "That's nice," she said flatly. But when Bella's dance recital came, she ordered custom shirts for the whole family and filled the house with balloons. Every small moment chipped away at the balance. And I, foolishly hoping for harmony, stayed silent more often than I should have. I told myself Grace was resilient, that she would learn strength from adversity. But what I forgot is that children shouldn't have to earn their right to be cherished. They should be allowed to shine without someone dimming their light. I also remembered how she used to corner me in the kitchen when no one was listening. She would say things like, "You spoil her too much. She'll grow arrogant." Or, "A little humiliation keeps children humble." She said these things with the authority of experience, as if cruelty was wisdom. And I, still eager to keep peace, would nod politely while my heart screamed. Looking back, I see the signs for what they were. Seeds of envy sprouting into acts of control. She couldn't stand the way Grace drew admiration without trying. She couldn't tolerate how people smiled at my daughter's kindness, how teachers praised her intelligence. For my mother-in-law, everything was a competition. And she played to win, even if it meant breaking a child's spirit. The birthday party was simply the first time she dared to make her cruelty visible. She had been testing boundaries for years. I had seen it in the way she tugged too hard on Grace's hair while braiding it, leaving her scalp red. In the way she corrected Grace's posture harshly in front of guests, saying, "You look sloppy." In the way she ignored her at family photos, pulling Bella to the center while Grace stood at the edge. Each time I told myself it was minor. Each time I convinced myself I was overreacting. But all those small moments lined up like stepping stones, leading directly to the patio where scissors flashed in the sun. I remember once, at a family reunion, Grace wore a simple headband with a bow. Bella frowned and pulled at her mother's sleeve, whispering something. A minute later, my mother-in-law announced loudly, "Grace, don't you think that bow is childish? You're making yourself look silly." Grace's little hands reached up, pulled the headband off, and stuffed it into her pocket. She didn't say a word, but I saw her cheeks burn, and I knew a piece of her confidence had been snatched away. All those memories came crashing down on me as I sat there in the dark, scissors gleaming under the lamplight. I realized this was never about hair. It was about control. It was about making sure Grace never outshone Bella, never received more love or attention than her cousin. It was about punishing me too, reminding me that in her world, I would always be the outsider, the one who could be dismissed, the one who didn't belong. The cruelest part was how easily others let it slide. Relatives looked away, shrugged, said things like, "That's just how she is." They excused her behavior as tradition, as old-fashioned discipline, as if humiliation was heritage. They chose comfort over truth, silence over protection. And in doing so, they became complicit. I thought about all the times I bit my tongue. I thought about all the times I smiled through clenched teeth, telling myself to pick my battles. And I realized that by staying silent, I had given her permission. I had handed her the scissors long before she ever picked them up. That night, with Grace asleep in her room and strands of her hair wrapped in tissue on the counter, I promised myself something. This cycle ends with me. My daughter will not grow up thinking she must shrink to make others comfortable. She will not carry the same scars I carry. Tomorrow, I decided, we would take the first step. Evidence in hand, truth on our side. If my mother-in-law wanted to play this as family tradition, I would show her what happens when the law enters the game. I whispered into the silence of the living room, words only I could hear. You picked the wrong girl, and you picked the wrong mother. Oh. The next morning, the house felt like a tomb. Grace barely touched her cereal. She sat at the table with her hoodie pulled over her head, shoulders hunched, eyes fixed on the bowl as if the milk held answers. Her uneven hair poked out from beneath the hood, a visible reminder of what had been stolen from her. I could hardly look without my chest tightening. I had not slept. Instead, I replayed the scene again and again, the scissors flashing, the smirk on my mother-in-law's face, the sound of strands hitting the patio floor. I knew what I had to do. For years, I had endured her insults, brushed off her manipulations, but this was different. This was not about me. This was about my daughter, and I would not let silence be my legacy. Grace, I said softly, sliding my phone across the table. Look at this. The screen showed a video, shaky but clear. My nephew, always glued to his phone, had filmed part of the party. In the background, you could hear children laughing, and then, faintly, my mother-in-law's voice. Sit still, or I'll make it worse. The camera tilted just in time to catch the scissors slicing through Grace's curls. Her eyes filled with tears. My nephew laughed nervously, not understanding the gravity. But for me, that video was gold. Proof. Grace's lip trembled. Do we have to show people? I cupped her cheek gently. We have to. Not just for you, but so she can never do this again. By noon, we were sitting in the waiting area of the police station. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, the chairs cold and metallic beneath us. Grace clutched my hand so tightly my fingers ached. I stroked her back as we waited. When our names were called, we entered a small office where an officer sat behind a desk. His badge caught the light. His eyes softened when he saw Grace's uneven hair. What happened? He asked gently. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The party, the scissors, the insults, the way no one stopped her. I played the video from my nephew's phone. The officer leaned forward, his jaw tightening as he watched. This is assault, he said quietly. On a minor. Grace's hand squeezed mine tighter. I kissed the top of her head. You're safe now, I whispered. The officer took our statements, carefully noting every detail. He asked if Grace wanted to speak. She hesitated, then nodded. Her voice was small, but steady. She said I was showing off. She cut my hair and everyone laughed. I didn't want her to, but she did it anyway. My heart ached with pride and sorrow at the same time. Even broken, she was brave. When we stepped out of the office, my phone buzzed with messages. The family group chat was exploding. Sabrina, you overreacted. It was just hair. Oh, my father-in-law. Why would you humiliate us like this? Bella's mom, Grace needs to toughen up. Life isn't always fair. I stared at the screen in disbelief. Not one apology. Not 1 ounce of accountability. Only excuses and blame. I typed back one line. The police will explain it better than I can. An hour later, my phone rang. It was my mother-in-law herself. I let it go to voicemail. Her voice cracked through the speaker. I can't believe you'd betray family like this. I raised your husband. I helped raise you. And this is how you repay me? By dragging us through the mud? Betray family. The words almost made me laugh. She had confused loyalty with silence, and I was done being silent. That evening, there was a knock at the door. I opened it to find my husband standing there, shoulders tense, eyes darting everywhere but my face. Behind him stood my mother-in-law, her face blotchy from tears, mascara smeared like bruises beneath her eyes. "How could you?" she wailed, clutching her pearls. "Calling the police over this? You're destroying the family." I held the doorframe with one hand, keeping my voice even. "You destroyed the family when you put scissors to my daughter's head." She shook her head violently. "I was disciplining her, teaching her humility. You twisted it." Grace appeared behind me, peeking from the hallway. Her hoodie was still up, but her swollen eyes told the truth. She stepped forward and whispered, "Grandma, you hurt me." For the first time, my mother-in-law faltered. Her lips trembled, but no apology came. Instead, she turned to my husband. "Tell her she's wrong. Tell her this is madness." My husband's eyes flicked from his mother to his daughter, then to me. His silence said more than words. He didn't defend her, but he didn't defend us either. He stood caught in the middle, paralyzed by fear of choosing sides. "See?" My mother-in-law spat. "Even he knows you've gone too far." I straightened my back. "Number he knows you've gone too far. He just doesn't have the courage to say it out loud." Her face twisted, half rage, half desperation. "You'll regret this." I closed the door slowly but firmly. Her cries echoed in the hallway until the sound faded. Later that night, I sat with Grace while she scrolled through her phone. Messages from cousins and classmates had already started. Some mocked her haircut, repeating what adults must have told them. Others asked if it was true that police were involved. Grace's hands shook as she read. I took the phone away gently. "Let them talk," I said. "The truth is on our side." She leaned against me, tired. "Do you think she'll ever say sorry?" I stroked her hair, uneven as it was. "Some people never do, but we don't need her apology to move forward." The next morning, the police called. They confirmed they were opening an investigation. They asked if Grace was willing to provide the hair clippings as evidence. I handed over the tissue I had saved. The officer assured me it would be logged properly. When word spread through the extended family, the reaction was chaos. Some cousins supported us quietly with messages of encouragement. Others accused me of ruining everything. At church, whispers followed us down the aisle. Some looked with pity, others with judgment. I held Grace's hand tighter, daring anyone to speak directly. Through it all, I remained calm on the outside, though inside I burned. My mother-in-law had always relied on silence to protect her. Now the silence was broken, and she couldn't bear the sound of her own actions echoing back at her. That evening, my husband finally spoke. He sat on the couch, staring at the floor. "They're saying Mom might face charges." I looked at him steadily. "She should. What she did was abuse." "Who?" He rubbed his face with both hands. "She's crying all the time. She says you've ruined her life." I almost laughed. "She ruined her own life when she put her hands on our daughter." He had no answer. The room hung heavy with truth neither of us could escape. I tucked Grace into bed that night, smoothing the blanket over her small frame. She whispered sleepily, "Thank you for protecting me." My throat tightened. "Always," I promised, and as I turned off the light, I knew one thing with absolute certainty. My mother-in-law could cry at the station. She could wail in front of neighbors. She could beg for sympathy from anyone who would listen. But the mask she had worn for years had finally cracked. And behind it, everyone would see her for what she truly was. Days blurred together after the police report was filed. At first, the phone rang constantly. My mother-in-law left long, breathless voicemails, sobbing, insisting she had only been trying to teach Grace a lesson. My father-in-law sent short texts filled with disappointment, as though I had betrayed the family by daring to protect my child. Sabrina messaged me once, saying, "You could have handled this quietly." I never replied. Grace began to heal in small ways. We went to a salon where a kind stylist reshaped what was left of her hair. She complimented Grace on her resilience, telling her that short hair brought out her eyes. Grace smiled faintly, the first genuine smile I had seen since the party. When she looked in the mirror afterward, her reflection was different, but she whispered, "It's me again." That was enough. At school, the whispers spread. Some children teased, repeating words they must have overheard from adults, but a few friends defended her. She learned quickly who her real allies were. One day she came home and said, "Mom, I don't care if they laugh. I know I'm strong." My chest swelled with pride. The wound was deep, but she was growing stronger around it. Meanwhile, the investigation moved forward. Officers interviewed relatives who had been at the party. Some admitted they saw what happened, but claimed they thought it was harmless. Others refused to comment, too afraid of rocking the family boat. The video, however, spoke louder than their silence. It was undeniable. The sight of my mother-in-law raising those scissors, the sound of Grace's protest, the cruel tone of her voice. It was all captured. When the officers came to take her statement, she broke down in the lobby of the station. People saw her mascara-streaked face, her trembling hands clutching tissues, her dramatic cries about being misunderstood. For once, her performance didn't work. Sympathy did not erase evidence. Authority did not bend to manipulation. The family fractures widened. Some cousins sent me quiet words of support, saying they had suffered under her sharp tongue too, that they admired me for standing up when they never could. Others accused me of destroying family unity, insisting that airing private matters in public was shameful. I stopped explaining myself. I no longer needed their approval. My husband remained torn, trapped between loyalty to his mother and love for his daughter. He slept in silence beside me, his body heavy with indecision. One night, I told him plainly, "Neutrality is a choice too, and it tells Grace exactly where you stand." His eyes welled with tears, but he said nothing. The distance between us grew like a canyon. As weeks passed, my mother-in-law stopped calling me. She turned her energy toward anyone who would listen, painting herself as a victim of an ungrateful daughter-in-law. She told neighbors I had exaggerated, that I had brainwashed Grace into believing she was traumatized, but the truth had already escaped her control. The video had made its way beyond family. People knew. The mask she had worn for decades was slipping. Grace and I, however, found peace in small routines. We baked cookies late at night, our kitchen filled with laughter and the smell of sugar. We walked in the park together, her hair short but her stride steady. She began sketching again, filling notebooks with drawings of girls with crowns, girls with wings, girls who were unbreakable. Each drawing was a declaration of her healing. One Sunday afternoon, while folding laundry, I received an unexpected knock. It was my cousin-in-law, Ashley. She looked nervous, shifting from foot to foot. "I just wanted to say," she whispered, "you did the right thing. She's been cruel to all of us. We were just too scared to speak up. But now, maybe things will change." Her words lingered long after she left. Maybe things would change. Or maybe not. But either way, I knew I had changed. I had drawn a line in the sand, one that no one could erase. The police case concluded with a warning and mandatory counseling for my mother-in-law. It wasn't jail time, but it was accountability. She had to face officials who treated her not as a matriarch, but as a woman who had harmed a child. That was enough. For once, the power she clung to slipped from her fingers. Months later, family gatherings were quieter. Invitations arrived, but I declined. I no longer wanted Grace in rooms where people excused cruelty as tradition. I no longer wanted myself in spaces where silence was expected as obedience. We celebrated birthdays with close friends instead, people who cherished my daughter for who she was. Those rooms felt lighter, freer. My mother-in-law avoided us, but I heard from others that she often wept about losing her influence. Some said she regretted what she had done. Some said she still blamed me. I no longer cared which was true. Regret without change was meaningless. Blame without power was harmless. Grace's hair grew back, longer and stronger. But more importantly, her spirit grew too. One day she looked at me across the dinner table and said, "I'm glad you didn't stay quiet." Tears filled my eyes. Neither am I. I had spent years swallowing insults, enduring manipulation, hoping to keep peace. But peace built on silence is not peace. It is surrender. And I was done surrendering. So yes, my mother-in-law cried at the station. She cried in front of police officers, in front of relatives, in front of anyone who would listen. But those tears did not cleanse her. They only revealed the truth. She had finally lost control. And me? I gained something greater than her approval could ever give. I gained my daughter's trust, my own strength, and the knowledge that silence will never again be my answer. I do not know if she realizes it yet, but when she cut Grace's hair, She cut more than curls. She cut through the last thread of power she held over us, and she will never hold it again.